World of Percussion. We're broadcasting now a lecture recital given by James Blades, who is assisted by Joan Goosens. It's a recording made at the Jubilee Hall last June during the 1973 Aldeburgh Festival, and it's introduced by Imogen Holst.
For me, there's no need to introduce such a well-loved artist. We all listen to him with admiration and delight, whether he's playing to us or talking to us. And we learn from him the whole time. It's a great joy to be able to welcome him and his partner Joan, who helps him not only with his lectures and demonstrations, but also with the research for the books he writes. And may I, on your behalf, thank both of them in advance for the lovely time they're going to give us during the next hour.
First, good morning to you all, and to say how delighted Miss Goosens, myself, and the instruments are at paying another visit to Aldeburgh Festival on this occasion to bring to you, at extremely close quarters, the world of percussion, and percussion from all over the world, and to demonstrate its purpose in the orchestra of today. Percussion. It was surely the first effort by ancient man at organized sound. The clap of the hand, the beat on the chest, and the stamp of the foot, and later those primitive sounds were augmented by musical sounds produced by striking a resonant solid or a stretched membrane. And those simple pieces developed into the instruments of percussion that grace that orchestra of today. And how well you know your orchestra? It's 4 groups, important strings, elegant woodwind, noble brass, and number 4, the last. But by no means the least, but ladies and gentlemen, quite often the most mysterious, the instruments of percussion. And how did this world of percussion start? The first instrument known to man, we have discovered, was a percussion instrument. Its name, a rattle. Oh, the first instrument with which you were first acquainted in life. In its simplest form, it was the pod of a plant in which the seeds had dried, a piece of stick for a handle, and the first instrument was made. It was shaken. Rhythm, primitive rhythm, inspiring the dance. The rattle in the hands of the shaman, it is still credited with a power of magic. It will bring the rain, it will heal the sickness. The rattle, you know the rattles better today, in pairs, as maracas, and I don't have to tell Aldeburgh, they pay a certain gentleman in the famous London nightclub a fabulous sum of money for going. But he does that remarkably well, as everything should be done in music but he's only doing what his forebears have been doing for thousands of years. The rattle, the shaker, to you the maraca, the next stage. As I say to the under-fours, these ancients roam in the forest looking for things to eat and things to wear. They picked up little pieces of wood, rhythm sticks, dancing sticks, concussion sticks, traced in musical history to the ancient Egyptians, the lady timekeeper in the harvest field, and the scythes worked rhythmically, directed by a simple instrument of percussion, the claves. And on television, the producer said, "Mr. Blades, there is a skeleton on the film, and his teeth are rattling." I said, "Are they rattling?" And from this simple instrument, we got a remarkable imitation. The clave, the concussion stick. The next stage came the piece of bamboo cane. But as well as striking this, these ancients put notches in it, and they scraped it. Oh, another sound, this time the gramophone record, and the conductor said, "It is evening, the rooks and crows are going to bed." I said, "I think so." And again we get an imitation, but you score readers, the rite of spring. The rezo, the scraper, the guiro, and this simple instrument is audible through that large symphony orchestra. The scraper, like the rattle, credited with a magical power. In the Far East, it is still believed that at the sowing of the seed, the scraper invokes the harvest to be fruitful. Scrapers, clickers, shakers, this world of percussion is advancing. The first drum was a log drum, a log that was hollowed for resonance. In some cases, the log was skillfully fashioned to produce two distinct tones. The slit drum, still used in remote areas to send a message by means of that Morse code pattern. And from the slit drum, as we know it in the West, to the first membrane drum. The skin drum occurred much later in musical history than is generally supposed. The skin of the animal was stretched over the tree trunk that was hollow, or was made hollow. These ancients learned early that resonance was essential to their music. They pulled the skin taut with cords, and a new sound came. The membrane drum, the native drum. Let us play rhythm on a skin drum. As soon as that drum beats, everyone wants to mark time to the pulse of the drum. And the beat of the drum is still heard today in the forest. The bush telegraph, no wireless, no telephone. On the hilltop, the drummer plays the pattern. 500 yards away, another drummer repeats. 500 yards away, and the message is sent in little more than the speed of sound by means of beating on a drum. A drum, a drum. Macbeth doth come. And in the 16th century, we had Drake's drum. We'll drum them up the channel. And in the last war, the drum played an important part in our national history. There was that V for victory signal, Winston Churchill's message of hope. Now, the BBC wished that signal, and they experimented with the Beethoven Fifth Symphony. But that was not quite what they wanted. They wanted the letter V in Morse, 3 dots and a dash. And I recorded that signal throughout the war on this drum from Africa, a drum sending a message, a drum from Africa. Let us meet next, but by no means less in antiquity. Let us meet a drum from China, from the Far East and its world of percussion, a skin over a shell, another skin, a double-headed drum. The drum head is called a drum head in orchestral practice. Here, the Chinese drum, the wood shell, 2 skins, but in this case, the heads are nailed. The Asiatic believes in the significance of the iron nail, a token of strength. Let us hear the drum from China, Africa. We begin to make music on instruments of percussion. So why not move to 1 or 2 of the orchestral instruments of percussion and compare them. First, the side drum, so called for reason of its military origin, the drum worn at the side by the soldier to inspire the march. And let's look carefully at the orchestral side drum. A piece of skin over a shell, another skin, a double-headed drum, screw tension. But with a difference, pieces of wire called snares, giving this instrument in the orchestra its second and now quite popular name, snare drum. But those snares, they give the instrument its crackling sound. When the top skin is struck, the top skin is called the batter head. When the batter head is struck, the underskin vibrates against the pieces of wire. Remove the wires from the vellum so there's no vibration. Let us observe. We return to the jungle. Snares back. Royal Festival Hall with the side drum from the orchestra. In the orchestra today, the drum is placed on the stand. It is played with the drumsticks and it sounds. It makes you want to keep time to it, doesn't it? And that's just what it jolly well does to the orchestra. It helps the orchestra to keep in time. And most of the ladies and gentlemen in the orchestras it's my privilege to play in, they will not agree that the instruments of percussion help to keep them in time. But we know that the beat of the drum is something that they lean on for support. Now, if the drum plays, even Stuart Bedford must go, ooh, 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 ooh. Let's see how well this orchestra plays in time when the drum is playing. We are ready. This orchestra plays in time. And we've had pitter-pat, pitter-pat. Now we want that long note. The long note on the snare drum you know so well, as on other percussion instruments, the long note, the roll. Here's a roll, a long note on a side drum. And that, as you know, is the simplest thing to do in percussion playing. All you have to do is to practice. And this is what we practice. 2 on each hand are called ma, mi, da, di. After about 6 months' practice, it goes like this. After about 12 months' practice, and after about 5 years' practice, everything is simple. Everything. And then... And then at the concert hall, the maestro points the baton to you, and you have to play that smooth roll that opens the national anthem. And instead of sounding, you get what we call in the trade a touch of the pearl as it goes. I'm afraid you've heard something like that before, but Madam says, Mr. Blades, 40 years in the orchestra, you should not have the pearlies, but I beg of you, you go to the symphony concert, what do you invariably see? The back of the conductor, a beautifully tailored Hawes and Curtis dress suit. What do we see? Make a wrong note if you dare. And believe me, some of them can hold that baton sufficiently long poised for you to develop a touch of the but always a stout heart. Now, what better example for the long note on the snare drum than Rossini, the thieving magpie, La Gazza Ladra. The scene, the courtyard, in the centre of the courtyard, the drum plays a bold roll. It is echoed in the mountain, 500 yards away. A picture of distance, and that wonderful moment in the life of the orchestral side drummer when he plays a solo, Ravel's Bolero. You know, that one that goes so quietly. And as you know, that is marked double piano. The last time I played that, I played safe. I thought I'll make it absolutely piano. I went like this. His nib stopped the orchestra at rehearsal. Do you know what he said to me? Miles too loud. Ravel's Bolero. Yes, I remember. It is now quite 30 years ago that I played that during the war with a rather illustrious orchestra, Louis Levy and music from the movies, and we were invited to Windsor Castle to play at a concert that His late Majesty gave to the troops. Oh, the great piece, Ravel's Bolero. And when we had finished our concert, we were introduced to their Majesties, as people are on those occasions. And when it came to my turn, he said, please tell me, we have Ravel's Bolero on record in the Castle Library. We hear the drum, it goes dum, 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 dum. It seems to go on for about 15 minutes. It never changes. Please tell me, how do you know when to stop playing the drum? I said, Your Majesty, with your permission, sir, I will tell you a state secret. 8 bars from the end of my music, I have 2 big red pencil lines. I know that in our special arrangement, at that point, the 3 trombones, they pick up their instruments and they play in unison. Boom, 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 boom. I merely count 7 measures from there, sir, and smack off on the first beat of the 8th bar. He said, wonderful, but please tell me what would happen if the 3 trombone players did not pick up their instruments, and play. I said, sir, I'm very much afraid there would be 4 new phases in the orchestra the next morning. Ravel's Bolero, the side drum, the snare drum. With those snares released, it will substitute, if needs be, the tone of the tenor drum, the deep drum without snare that we associate with the funeral march. And in the orchestra, Bartók, he uses the unsnared side drum, edge and center. The side drum has travelled a little since its introduction into the orchestra by Murray in 1706, and prior to that it was a military instrument giving commands in battle. When musketry came in, the drum had to be superseded by the bugle, but before that the drum gave its signals, and flams, drags, ornaments were used, and the soldier recognized them. Commence fire, cease fire, immediately recognized. And from the side drum to the bass drum, the big fellow that in the orchestra is usually given a more friendly name. The bass drum is termed the big drum. What a fine fellow is the bass drum. And if a long note is played on the big drum, ha-ha, the sticks are different from the side drum sticks. Cotton, wool, or felt at the top. The 22nd bar of the William Tell Overture. From the distant hill can be heard the approaching storm. By the 551st bar, the storm breaks in all its fury, and our world of percussion in the Far East, in the Shinto temple, at the first flash of the sun, over the mountain top, the Shinto monk announces the birth of the new day on the Dadaiko, which is translated the great drum. And in the military band, you observe the bass drummer will perform the tremolo with the single stick, double-ended, giving his other hand freedom, if needs be, for the use of the cymbals. And from the depths of the bass drum to the brilliance of the cymbals. In the orchestra, a pair are clashed together. Some years ago, I did something like that, Christmas time, Royal Albert Hall, Royal Choral Society, carol concerts. I gave a mighty smash to open the first Noel, or at least that's what I thought it was. It turned out to be an encore of Silent Night. As you can guess, Sir Malcolm was thrilled with me. In the orchestra, the long note. In the military band, controlled as accurately as any instrument in the orchestra, the quaver, crotchet, minim, treble piano. The imitations, Romeo and Juliet. How successfully does Tchaikovsky imitate the clash of the swords in the duel scene? Short notes on orchestral cymbals. And when the sword is drawn from the scabbard in the opera Tosca, color from orchestral percussion. On occasions, the long note with a soft stick, introduced, we feel, by Wagner throughout the Ring. Wagner also said, when the metal is boiling in the pot. They are preparing to cast the great ring. He said, the bubbling, we must have a 2-plate roll. Shimmer from orchestral cymbals. How we prove the antiquity of percussion. You sing your 150th psalm, praise the Lord, upon the loud cymbals. You also sing, praise him upon the high-sounding cymbals. A world of percussion, the death cymbals at the funeral in Tibet. And in your prayer book you read, praise the Lord upon the well-tuned cymbals. Known to us today as crotals, ancient cymbals, introduced into the orchestra to the best of our knowledge by Berlioz in his Queen Mab Scherzo from his dramatic symphony. Now you often say, I have seen those 3 instruments, side drum, bass drum and cymbals, played by one performer. Simple when you have the equipment. And with the snare drum, we want the bass drum. Oh, what have we here? As we say to the under 3s, press upon the pedal with the foot, he's bound to give the big drum a 4th one. And with that, we want the side drum. We also want the cymbals. We'll put the other foot on those. And we should have the real military band cymbals. And now to hear the instruments first one after the other. And now all three at the same time. And as I say to those very tiny ones in schools, what a rhythm from great masters like Schubert, eh? And now we go to gentle sounding instruments. First, the triangle. A very simple instrument to play. Or is it? Not according to the professional who proudly held one aloft, whilst he counted 97 bars rest, and then he struck his thumb, and... and occasionally nothing can be so embarrassing as silence, eh? And the long note, the beater inside the triangle. Work quickly from side to side. Let's hear that sound of the orchestra. Anitra's dance, the Peer Gynt suite. Anitra bows to the audience before she dances. As she bows a chord, but in the chord silver coming from the triangle. Anitra dances. And you would say to me, but the greatest moment for the triangle in the orchestral repertoire is surely the solo that it plays in the Liszt Piano Concerto number 1. Nothing is heard for a second but the pulse of the triangle. And from the triangle to one of the most ancient of percussion instruments, the tambourine. A piece of animal skin stretched over a wooden frame, little brass jingles which vibrate when the vellum is struck. In the orchestra, treble piano with the fingertips, mezzo forte with the knuckles, double forte, never double forte with the fingertip. You never know. It is. And then we could have 2 for 1, perhaps as in Bartok, the children's dance. And we have the tambourine, that long note in another way. Wet the top of your thumb, get him nice and sticky, and then just press your thumb very gently. One of those frightening things to do in the orchestra. You wait 14.5 minutes for your entry. Counting bars rest, getting your thumb ready. Ooh. Keeping it sticky. Oh, the time is coming. Oh, the moment arrives and... It's back into the band room for a little more practice. And the gentle pulse of the tambourine in the music of Mozart. The tambourine, let us take it back, the tambourine of the Israelites. And occurring at the same time, there was the sistrum of ancient Egypt, the instrument that Queen Cleopatra armed her forces, her lady forces, the sistrum to give a token of strength. And from the tambourine, we go to Spain, to the Spanish castanets. In the orchestra, not always played in the traditional manner. In the orchestra, mounted on a handle. I think Miss Goosens was born in Spain. There we are. Thank you very, very much. Now, in the orchestra, they are shaken, they are played on the wrist, the knee, in the air. They sometimes join the tambourine in the Spanish waltz. And clarity, the conductor wants it clear, precise. And sometimes the rhythm is so fast, we have to double him. And sometimes the rhythm is too fast for our fingers. Ha-ha. But we defeat him. Ha-ha. We defeat him. We have a little machine. Ha-ha. Yeah, ha-ha. And they are fixed with elastic, and we can play the castanet machine. And from the castanet machine, we go to the sound of the jingle bells. Dear Elgar, the overture cocaine, the harness on the horse that drew the cab through London streets. And Mozart, in his 6 German dances, he said that the jingle should be in actual pitch. And we have the jingles in Mozart, and from the jingles to the sound of the wood block. What did the ancients do with the tree trunk? They hollowed it for resonance. The orchestral wood block hollowed for resonance. Another wood block, also from China, known to us in the West as the Chinese temple block. But in its own country, a sacred instrument, the wooden fish. During the Confucian service, it rests on the blue silken cushion, and the monk announces the intervals with strokes on the wooden fish, as the little bell is shaken in services in the West. But in the West, in the orchestra, we use the temple blocks to create an impression. Perhaps it is a grandfather clock. And I'm sure somewhere in this illustrious establishment there is a tap that needs a new washer. And we hear something like, and we are obliged to send for the plumber. And from the wood block to the orchestral whip. Two pieces of wood colliding, strictly speaking, concussion. Two similar objects colliding. The whip, in Death in Venice, Benjamin Britten requests two whips, high and low. Whip, and from the whip to the sound of the anvil, a piece of metal often to imitate the real implement. Walton Belshazzar's feast. Quite often a piece of metal to substitute the real implement. This a car spring that I concocted for the burning fiery furnace. And the first time I gave that a clonk in Orford Church at rehearsal, Ben said to me, "A marvellous sound, Jim." I said, as indeed it should be. The spring comes from a Rolls Royce. And incidentally, a hammer from India, the implement that is used to tension those wonderful small drums of India, the tabla. That world of percussion. Now in the orchestra, quite often we have two tones. The village smithy or Wagner, we have 2, 3, 4, if the orchestra is complete, 17 anvils playing Wagner's cross rhythm. Those dreadful little dwarfs are wielding. They are wielding the metal into the all-powerful ring. At the back of the orchestra we hear. And from people hard at work at the forge to people hard at work in the orchestra. Sometimes the orchestral percussionist is so hard-pressed he's obliged to join the ranks of the wind players. He even blows on a whistle or strokes on the drum with those fascinating little pieces, the wire brushes that make that gentle scraping sound that the young man in the Bop group, he puts the boys in the groove, doesn't he? With his rhythm on the brushes. He goes... Hey, and what a wonderful young man he is, eh? The brush. Is it original? It certainly is not. Let us go back to Haydn, the Military Symphony in G, the switch, the bundle of twigs, the little brush on the bass drum. Il Seraglio, we have the bass drum struck on one side with the stick and the switch on the other. And Mahler, in his symphonies, the besom The broom occasionally scrubs the drum, on one occasion in 9/8 time. And we even have the use of the scrubbing brush. There is the surf on the shore at Aldborough. And then we have the paddle boat in Death in Venice. And the scrubbing brush, it takes us back to the jazz wire brush, which has given us an inspiration. We're not too old, we're not too young for a ride on an old-fashioned steam train. First the guard would blow the whistle. The engine driver would reply. He would release the steam. And he would start the train. But now, to something more serious, the large gong. The large gong in the orchestra, the large flat gong from the east, known as the tam-tam. Here is a tam-tam as used in the symphony orchestra. And that may remind you of the J. Arthur Rank film trademark. Now, I recorded those original strokes for that Herculean figure. They put a microphone in front of this instrument, I watch the screen, they start the machine rolling, and I go. So even Mr. Rank has been obliged to borrow an instrument from the orchestra. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is quite impossible for me to reach the peak of the power of this noble instrument. Its scream is terrifying. It may burst your eardrum. It might damage the Jubilee Hall. We won't do that. But instead of a train ride, accelerando, rallentando, this time crescendo, diminuendo, as we say to the tiny tots, not a ride on a train, a ride on a spaceship. They release him over there. He flies, he gets nearer and nearer, louder, louder, passes the hall with a roar, and dies, harmlessly we hope, miles away. We are ready. What a pity we dare not bring it to its full strength. But I'm sure you'll agree that its beauty may also rest in its treble piano. One ominous stroke toward the close of the Pathetique, the number 6 symphony of Tchaikovsky, the already dark motive is saddened, with one touch on the orchestral tam-tam. Resounding, if needs be, for 1 minute and 7 seconds. The tam-tam. On occasions, composers request the sound of tuned gongs. Gongs from the islands, Thailand, from Burma, the mainland, gongs from the east with perfect notes. Puccini in Madame Butterfly and Turandot. I wonder what those metal craftsmen of the ancient East would have thought if they'd have known that a gong was to be lowered into a tub of water. John Cage has requested it. Or for that matter, what about a cymbal placed on a kettle drum? But we will return the instruments to their natural home, the East, and its world of percussion. The debaki, the temple gong, the resting bell of Japan. And from the temple of the Orient, let us return to the concert hall of the West to meet the aristocrat of the orchestral percussion, the kettle drums or timpani. The kettle drums, descendants of the small Arabian kettle drums known as nakeas. In the orchestra, the orchestral kettle drum, a copper bowl over which is stretched a single skin. The back of a calf, or in some cases today, a plastic material. Both have their merits. The calf skin, with its slightly superior tone, the calf skin is grievously affected by atmospheric conditions. Dampness will lower the pitch of the calf head. The plastic head is rarely affected by those conditions. Now the kettle drums. In the orchestra today, 2, 3, 4 or more. But in the main, they operate as they did originally, in pairs, playing on the strong notes of the chord, the tonic and the dominant. Later, in fifths, they entered the orchestra in pairs from the back of the drum horse. Purcell, Bach, Handel were inspired by the sound of the cavalry kettle drums. They introduce them into the orchestra, accompanying trumpets or great choirs. The kettle drum, tunable, pressure on the drum head by means of the threaded handle or the foot pedal raises or lowers the pitch. Release the pressure. A range of 5 full tones on each kettle drum, displacing on a pair an octave, giving composers the privilege of playing an upper or a lower dominant in the keys of F and B flat. Now, if I were allowed to advertise, I could tell you that I've gone very deeply into that in my literature, published by OUP and Faber, and that I've recently made a long player for discourses. Other than saying that I hope you will buy them, I will say no more than that. The kettle drums. We start by putting them in tune with our orchestra, using them in the first place as hand screw instruments. A common chord of D major, please. And if that chord were given you in choir, you would sing the note boom. And if you were symphonists in the orchestra, that is yours. You keep it there whilst you turn the handle. But in the orchestra, that must be done quietly. No one must hear the timpanist testing. You observe them at the concert. They touch the drum head very lightly with their fingertip. But even that is audible. That is why they put their ear to the drum and listen like this. Giving one dear lady the impression that the timpanists were very fond of their instruments and that they sometimes kissed them like... Do you hear I'm producing the upper harmonic? And when you see them hard at work like that, they're not kissing their instruments, they're getting them in tune without disturbing their fellows. What a dreadful moment it would be if whilst the leader was playing a glorious solo, if the kettle drummer were... I'm afraid there'd be some trouble in the band room after the concert. The other note that is wanted is a fourth below. The first solo written for the kettle drums, Purcell, in his opera, The Fairy Queen. And then you sing, Christians be joyful. And if you are not sure of it, you listen to the kettle drums because they say... And then, dear Handel, the mighty Hallelujah. But it was Haydn who placed the kettle drums firmly into the orchestra. We have the orchestral timpani in a snatch from the finale of the Haydn Clock Symphony. And perhaps the gentleness of Mozart. And if the orchestra changed its key from the key of D to the key of E flat, the composer would wish that the kettle drummer had new notes. He would give him some bars rest in which to change, some a lot less than others. And now the timpanist counts bars rest, 4 bars rest toward the close of the first movement of the Beethoven Emperor Piano Concerto. I'm afraid the kettle drums get annoyed. They say, why, we are noble instruments. If we play a long note, we can even tell the pianist what piece to play. Sometimes a brittle sound. Hard sticks, Elgar. The Enigma variations. Variation 13, there is that tremolo to give the impression of the pulse of the ship's engine. In Elgar's day, 2 pennies were used. Today, infra-dig to do it with anything less than 50 penny pieces. And Stanford, the songs of the fleet, we have the tremolo with the fingertips. And in Death in Venice, B.B., he said that the kettle drum should be struck with the switch. Ha-ha, but the modern instrument, it helps the player, it helps the composer. The note can be changed quickly. It even allowed that new sound to enter the orchestra. Oh, that glissando, fortunately it is used sparingly by great masters, Bartók, the rise and fall in his sonata for pianos and percussion. And toward the close of his opera, The Rape of Lucretia, Benjamin Britten, he gives the kettle drum a distinct rising passage. Here is the motive. What have we now? Who will you give the octave to? To Beethoven, the metronome in the 8th, and the scherzo in the 9th. Now, then, he has written a short piece for our recital to show a quick change on a pair of kettle drums, whilst they accompany the pianoforte solo. For this, I beg of you, I'm obliged to read from my music. I'm also obliged to put on my spectacles. I trust that proves to you that I read from the music. But what it allows me to show you is what happens at rehearsal if we drop a horrible clangor. We go, ooh, dear, 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 dear. Bless my soul and life. We must, of course, clean our spectacles. We place the music in a position that we may see the conductor, if we wish to see the conductor. It is the right piece It is always better to have the right piece of music. Not long ago, I played an avant-garde work with 6 percussion players. After about 15 minutes at the first rehearsal, one of the young ones came at the back. He touched me on the back. He said, please, James, I've just discovered that for the last 15 minutes, I've been playing the wrong piece. I said, son, get back, keep your mouth shut. He hasn't noticed it yet. We prepare the drums for their entry. For on occasions I'm obliged to still the sound of the kettle drum, to lessen its vibration. The orchestral timpanist, you will see, places a piece of felt on the vellum to lessen its vibration, sec, staccato. But in this, the drum must ring and be halted. Now the touch of my hand would be audible. Therefore, on occasions, we wear the wool glove. We prepare the drums for their entry. The kettle drum piece by Benjamin Britten. The kettle drum. We have heard the drum change its note. Is it an innovation? Not if we return to the ancient Far East, the hourglass drum, the talking drum of Africa, 2 heads connected with cords. When the cords are pressed into the shape of the shell, the pitch is changed. Is there anything new in our world of percussion? Let us turn to the last group of orchestral percussion, the glockenspiel, xylophone, vibraphone, and tubular bells. They had their rise in remote areas thousands of years back. The ringing stone traced to ancient China, 2300 BC. When I strike the ringing stone, then the gods will speak. The wood, resonant wood, that inspired the marimba of Africa. The Asiatic metallophone, the metal slab. In today's orchestra, glockenspiel, xylophone, vibraphone, tubular bells. The tune percussion, most familiar. The tune percussion instrument most familiar to you, possibly the glockenspiel, bars of steel with a sound like a little bell. Elgar, little bells, the wand of youth sweet. Wagner, the dance of the apprentices, the master singers. And what better an imitation? A musical box, the piano and the glockenspiel. We'll wind up our little musical box, and he may play a piece, musical snuff box, written by Leodolf. And we have and after the glockenspiel, the xylophone, bars of wood, each resonated with a metal tube. The xylophone could well have been inspired, the orchestral xylophone could have been inspired by the African xylophone, the marimba. In this case, each bar is resonated by means of a gourd. The African marimba. In the orchestra today, you will note the term marimba is applied to a deep-toned xylophone. The orchestral xylophone, higher sounding, with its bars of wood, high, in some cases brittle, bony, skeleton's bones, dance macabre, and fossils from the carnival of the animals we hear. And perhaps a cheeky little gallop. And gentler, playing treble piano, and with rubber-headed beaters we might even get... And we have the Arthur. The Arthur Benjamin Jamaican rumba, of course, and those of you that have heard Death in Venice, there is that wonderful sound. The xylophone is absolutely solo in that chitter-chatter of the children. But we couldn't leave the xylophone without that spot of fern. I should get into trouble with the BBC if I did not play that spot of fern, that gallop. You know, 40 years ago, a gentleman used to wheel a mammoth instrument to the front, 14.5 feet long. Sounded just the same as this. And he played a solo, something rather jolly, quite rapide. Perhaps he had a friend in the far corner, and he went, whoop, whoop. You know, I played that solo about 6 years ago at a school in North London. And a little boy about 6½, he came up to me, he says, "Oi, mate, oh, mate," he says, "I think you're nearly as good as Ringo." And from the xylophone to the vibraphone, firmly established in the symphony orchestra and an important instrument in jazz. Oh, that wobble. It is achieved scientifically. The resonating chamber underneath each metal bar, the resonating chamber on the vibraphone, is opened and closed with a revolving fan, worked by motor mechanism. As the fan opens the chamber, the note is strengthened. As it closes it, it is weakened. We have the vibrato, you will hear it. A foot pedal, pressing or releasing felt for the control of length of sound. On occasions, 4 hammers, 4-note chords in this manner. Now you that play the piano, the intervals are made by opening and closing the beaters. If needs be, a full octave. On occasions, the vibraphone is used with the fans stationary to give the impression of the Asiatic metallophone. There is that wonderful moment, the magic of the vibraphone in B.B.'s new opera. And we will join the vibraphone and the xylophone. sound of the vibraphone to the sound of the church bell. Surely the most universal of instruments, the bell. In the orchestra, we have a peal of bells, and the bell reminds us of the passage of time. Morning has changed to afternoon, and it is time for us to say goodbye. Our world of percussion has surely turned full circle. Rhythm, primitive rhythm, surely inspiring the music of today. And we say goodbye, and we thank you.
In that lecture recital, The World of Percussion, James Blades was assisted by Joan Goosens. It was recorded in the Jubilee Hall during the 1973 Aldeburgh Festival.